Yep.
Yeah,
sure.
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah,
Okay,
sure.
hi, hey, good afternoon, good day, good evening, whatsoever. Welcome to my presentation on real-time personalization using Sidecore, JSS, Azure, and an external decision engine. It's quite a mouthful, it's quite some content as well. But before we start, I have a small question for you. Can you please make a donation to this organization in order to help us to overcome the COVID-19 disease? Please make a small donation if you can afford it. My name is Bas Lijten. I'm a 5-time Sidecore MVP and work as a software architect at Achmea. Achmea is the largest insurance company within the Netherlands. And Achmea on itself doesn't sell any insurances, but we have several brands for that. We have power brands and marketing brands. And they all share one common thing, is the architecture. For example, for the portal technology, they all run on Sidecore. I think we have momentarily running 140 different Sidecore environments within Azure. That's quite a lot. Well, let's get back to that real-time personalization. It's not a thing that I came up with, but it's something that came up from a vision. We're trying to build an excellent customer experience, and we're coming a long way. In the past, we had a channel-centric approach, but lately we place the customer in the heart of our organization. We're moving towards an omni-channel approach to have the right interactions with the customer at the right time and the right place in the right channel. In order to do that, we had to implement a 360-degree customer view, a very big store running on SAP HANA with terabytes of data on our customers to make decisions which are best for those customers based on that data. And that decision engine is a separate product, not running Sidecore, but running in a product called Pega Marketing. More on that later. Today, we are focusing on how we can retrieve those next best actions, which are made by the decision engine, who can retrieve those NBAs and use them within Sidecore. The higher goal for this is to achieve a net promoter score of +50 or higher. And today's story focuses towards one of these different teams which we have defined to achieve that goal, and is the personal customer journey with that customer. So let's get to a high-level overview of the architecture. As I just said, for our customer view, we do use SAP HANA in the cloud. Terabytes of data are stored there. It cannot be handled by XConnect. It's just too much data. It has to be accessible in real time, and XConnect cannot, or XDP cannot, handle that amount of data and that heavily customized part of the data. The next best actions are determined by the Pega Marketing System, an external decision engine. And today, we are focusing on the Sidecore technology. So as I told you before, for every portal that we have, for every brand, we have a Sidecore instance, which is being used for the portals. We are talking about XConnect because we are still using that stuff. And we are talking about the communication with that Pega Marketing System to retrieve those next best actions and use them in the channel. Why do we have such a setup, such a complex setup? Imagine a situation like this one. In a certain situation, a customer has a car insurance policy. And after several computations, Achmea computed that that customer can have a much more cheaper car insurance policy. So we send out an email, for example. That customer is going to read that email. And based on that email, he can visit that website or can make a call to our customer contact center. We have stored that interaction that we have sent that email to the customer view. And at the very moment that that customer calls the customer contact center, we can recognize that user by the telephone number, make a call to the decision engine, and the decision engine decides, hey, we have sent a letter, you're making a call, you're probably making that call because of that letter. So let's offer a personalized menu, a personalized IVR, so we can help you to make the choice much more faster than a regular approach. On the other hand, if you would visit the online portal, we could offer, for example, a widget in which he could alter his car insurance policy because we know that he is visiting that online channel because of the email or the letter that he has received. So that's an example of a use case that we are able to achieve right now. And with just an XConnect and a marketing automation setup, that was not possible. That's why we have abstracted it away and put it in a separate decision engine. Well, the decision engine can learn from its actions and can learn from the interactions. So there's an AI and an ML on top of it. We can define strategies in it. Our data scientists can put some strategies in it. Very complex strategies which cannot be put into Sitecore yet. So the architecture, how hard can it be? In the first design, we thought that Sitecore could query Pega directly. But what about latency? What about load? With millions of requests, things might go wrong. For every request on the web page that you could make, you would have a connection to Pega, and with those millions of visitors, that would just break. What we decided, just to put some kind of cache in between. So what's happening? We made a disconnected personalization approach. At the moment that something interesting happens within Sitecore, for example, a customer executes a premium calculation, Sitecore notifies Pega. Pega is going to compute a next best action and is sending that next best action as a kind of facet into XConnect. And Sitecore can acquire that NBA facet again to determine its personalization, to determine what kind of rendering should be shown on the page. We'll take a look at that later on. What we try to achieve is to keep things as simple as possible for our content editors, for our marketeers. So the heavy stuff, the very complex strategies can be defined in an external tool, while the outcome of that decision can be stored within Sitecore. As you can see over here, we do have a banner which is customized with 6 different customizations. And our content editors and our marketeers can just configure a condition or a Sitecore rule, which tells us when there is a next best action from Pega, whose name is equal to car and treatment is equal to retarget, then show this content. And if that doesn't evaluate to true, then we just go to the next rule, evaluate it, and if that one is true, then we will show the car content. It's nothing more than that, but it's quite complex on the hood. Let's move to the demo. Oh, what I forgot to say, in that next best action, so that personalized decision for that customer, we can store some additional data. And using tokens, which you can see over here, we created a separate pipeline for that. We can inject personalized data on the fly. So we don't have to alter any of the renderings at all. It's just being handled by a single pipeline by Sitecore, which is very powerful because you can have that personalized interaction at any place of your website. So let's move over to a demo, and we'll go deeper into the challenge that we faced later on. So what we see over here is just a demo website based on the brand by Centraalbeheer. If I refresh this page, well, nothing happens. So it's just a central banner. Take note of this Sitecore Global Analytics cookie with the ID E01. Remember that one because we will see that number back numerous times during the session. What we did, I don't have Pega on this machine. So I have a simulator on this machine, the XConnect test tool. This has the role of Pega, and I'm going to try to send a next best action to Sitecore and to update that website. And you might think, well, that's not too special. We do that all the time, but let's see what happens. So this is the JSON, well, the protocol that we defined. Please take note of the name and the treatment, car and retarget, as we just saw in that rule. And I'm going to send this next best action to Sitecore. And as expected, nothing happens on the website. But when I refresh this page, we do see that we have an instant update of this banner with the personalized content of the brand and the license plate number. And if I update that license plate number to ZB. Let me save it again and I refresh the page. Then that license plate number gets updated as well. This is pretty cool. We have an instant update of XConnect, but it is not a real-time personalization in which you could implement very new use cases. So let's move over to our JSS funnel. We have an embedded JSS funnel in this case. And the first thing that you see, so this upper part and the part below, that's just MVC. And this part with the intro, that's our JSS. It's an instant update of the funnel. And let's try to change the brand from Golf to a Seat. At the moment that I press save and I don't have any interaction with the browser, that browser gets updated. And that's really cool, because what kind of use cases will this open up for you? Imagine that a customer tries to calculate a premium and he's struggling with the data. He can't calculate its premium, or he can't supply for a contract or whatsoever. We could, for example, determine what is the value of the customer. Is it during opening hours of our contact center? Is there a call center agent available? Or is it just, is no one available? Based on all that kind of information, we can send an update to that user. And at that moment, we could offer a chat interaction or an offer to call me now or call me later or whatsoever. So a lot of new interaction possibilities will be there. I'm going to show you how we solve this approach on JSS. It's really simple, but before we can do that, I'm going to explain you the challenges that we faced to send data from Pega back to XConnect and the other way around. So it looks quite simple, just showing some personalizations, but under the hood, it gets complicated. And I've divided this in 4 different themes. We had issues in identifying contacts, issues with triggering and next best action, issues with the personalizing of the experience, and the feedback. The first part, identifying a contact. Why is this so hard? If you take a look under the hood of Sitecore, then on the very first request, a session gets started. And if a persistent cookie with that analytics ID, with that EO1 is provided, then Sitecore takes that value and is going to query for that analytics ID within XConnect. And that can return a contact and their facets. But if that user is a fresh user, a new user, then there is no analytics cookie. And then no XConnect user exists. So what happens? Sitecore starts its session. You can see that over here. A new ID will be created. But that contact will not be stored into XConnect. So Pega can send any update to XConnect at any moment in time. But if that user does not exist, then that NBA will not be stored and you will not have a personalized experience for that user. What can we do to overcome that? It's quite simple, it's just from the documentation, but it's a challenge we have to face. There is a property on your tracker.current.contact. It's called isNew. If that one is true, then it doesn't exist in XConnect. Then we should save that contact. We could save that contact and save it to the contact to the collection database. And if you're doing that, then that contact will be created in XConnect, and you can save that NBA data, that facet, into XConnect. That's all, but you have to create it explicitly on that very first call. That was challenge 1. The second challenge was the way to trigger a computation for the next best action. How can we put Pega to work? And it has a little bit of a comparison to the marketing automation plans within Sitecore. If something relevant happens within Sitecore, you would trigger a goal or an event. And in this case, we want to, based on that goal or event, we want to send that relevant event to Pega. Pega can go to do its job, determines the NBA, and send the NBA back to XConnect with the metadata. but that request needs to be sent immediately. How could we possibly do that? Well, Sitecore had that same issue. In some cases, you would be able to trigger a marketing automation plan immediately. In a normal situation, triggers and goals will be handled by the end of the session. It will be stored in XConnect by the end of the session, and no sooner than that, marketing automation plan will start to run. But there is a property on that goal or that event, and it's called isLive-Event. So what did we do? We created a Pega goal template based on the normal goal template and marked that isLive-Event as true. And we trained our marketeers that for every event or goal that takes place which is relevant for a next best action, will inherit that Pega goal template. So every template that we use is enabled by default as an isLive-Event. Well, these live events are handled by a certain pipeline. There's a processor for it, listenLive-Event. We created a custom processor and put it in front of that listenLive-Event processor, which is default for Sitecore. At that moment, so we can trigger that goal or event by an XHR request, a web API call, or a page request, of course, that goal will be handled. And if it's a Pega goal, we can recognize it based on the template. We are making a call to Pega. And if it's not a Pega goal, it's just a default handling in marketing automation or any other kind of technology that you have attached to it. Again, it's not hard, it's just connecting the dots. But this is how we can send an immediate event to Pega so Pega can start to do its job. The third one, personalize the experience. It's all about defining the right rendering and setting the right data source based on the data from XConnect. But there was a small challenge in this part as well. Let me get a little bit of water. We do serve these banners. These banners may or may not contain personalized data. And at the moment that we show this banner, we have to send an event back to Pega to notify them that we have seen this impression, so Pega can learn from it. More on that later. The real challenge behind this part is the way how Sitecore communicates with XConnect. Because what happened? We just saw that we are triggering events during the complete journey during a session. So it might happen that a visitor is opening a web page, requesting a page. Sitecore will get the data from XConnect, and Pega will send new NBAs. What could possibly go wrong in this situation? Take a closer look. By the end of the session, Sitecore will store every interaction, goal, and event back to XConnect. It will update XConnect on your contact. But in the time during that session, no call to XConnect will be made. So Pega can send any update, whatever it wants, to XConnect. Sitecore will not be able to get that new NBA from XConnect as long as there is no communication between Sitecore and XConnect. It's not hard to solve this one, but it has to be solved as well. And we had made a decision to put a little bit of overhead in this part. So what did we do? You could remove your contact from the session. What happens at that moment? At the moment that you remove your contact from the session, then it will get reloaded at the new request. So if I would remove this contact from my session, I would revisit another page. That's the point where I would reload my contact. For us, that was too slow. So we decided to remove the contact from session, reload it immediately. It has a very slight overhead from a performance view, but you can ignore that performance overhead. And at that moment, you have your updated contact with all the data that is required with the new set of next best actions. That's how we are making sure that we have the latest view of that customer in our Sitecore environment. and the rest is just handling, well, the normal situations. And the last part, feedback, I just explained a little bit about it. This was actually the hardest part. It was very hard to solve. It led to some extra cool functionality because of this implementation, we were able to inject those tokens that I showed you before, more on that later. The ugly part, it looks a little bit like a hack, and I'm not quite sure if this is the right approach, but it does a job for now. And well, I just need confirmation by Sitecode that this is the way to go as well. Let's dive into it to try to understand what's so hard and why it looks like a hack. You have to understand, we can have multiple next best actions, maybe hundreds of them. And every NBA has a unique interaction ID. You can see them over here. So the car and retarget interaction has an interaction ID ending on a 0, and the travel corona interaction has an interaction ID ending on a 1. And we need to solve two different use cases. We need to track the impressions shown because that can lead to an interaction on a different channel. Why is that the case? Let's move over to a very bad example. Sorry for that one. Imagine that this is a rendering served by a next best action. And it has a telephone number in it. This customer sees the banner and might take up his phone and start to call our customer care center. We could update the IVR knowing that he has seen this banner with a personalized choice to route him directly to the correct call agent. If we didn't register this impression, then we would not be able to route him to the correct call agent, and he had to traverse the different menus in the IVR. That's the reason why a tracking of an impression is important. The second part is we have to train Pega. There's some machine learning algorithms built on top of it, maybe some AI, I'm not sure about it. And based on everything that has been shown and has had an interaction, we can train those models to see, hey, what's effective, what's not so effective, and what should we alter on those strategies. So tracking the impression wasn't too hard. We'll get a list of next best actions from XConnect, and based on some small algorithm, we can determine if there is a next best action which evaluates to true for this condition. If there is a next best action, we create a new page event based on a next best action definition ID. We add the custom values to it with that custom interaction ID that we just saw in that NBA. And we send that to the, we register that within Sitecode. We're using live events for that, of course, because that we need an immediate training of that model. And we might need to serve a new NBA on a different channel for that customer. That's why that live event is needed again. The second part on this part was really hard. You can see this website. We have a banner on damage with a certain interaction button. And we have an update on the coronavirus on the website. So the challenge is, was there an interaction with a personalized component? There could be multiple personalized components. What personalized interaction caused the interaction? And we have to register that interaction. And one thing is sure, we can't do that post navigation, because when we navigate to a new page in the MVC setup, then all the context data is gone. So we can't detect if this button or this link caused the interaction. In order to be able to solve that, we tried to render a data attribute on the interaction, on the button, or on the hyperlink. And we have some JavaScript running on the website, which finds the events. And when one of those elements are clicked, which have that data personalization attribute, then it's first sending a new event to Sitecode using that live event mechanism. adding that interaction ID to it, and then it's going to execute the initial request, for example, a navigation to a page or the submit of a form. The hard part is, how can we get that interaction ID from that next best action, from that rule context, into the rendering? Because there is no backward relationship between the rule and the rendering. With other words, within the rendering, I can't determine what rule caused this rendering to render. What a word, rendering to render. So the NBA is needed to access information on the interaction ID and some other metadata. The rendering does not know by what rule it was triggered. Thus, the rendering can create the next best action that caused the condition to become true. So we can't look up what happened over here. But the other way around does work. And why? You might have worked with that personalization engine, and you can define some custom conditions over here. You will also define what happens when this rule evaluates to true, because the presentation can be set and the content, the data source can be set. So somewhere in the sidecar lifecycle, a pipeline exists which puts this kind of data on the actual rendering. With a little bit of reflection, we find out that this happens in the customized rendering processor. And two different properties will be passed through to the actual rendering. So what happens? In the rule context, the rendering and the data source will be set. And there are two different methods called transfer data source and transfer rendering item, which are actually putting the rendering and the data source on the new rendering, which will be handled by the rendering pipeline of Sidecar. So this opened up a method for us to pass through extra information. We just had to find out how we could put that extra information on one of these properties in this reference object. And we found out a way on how to do it. So what did we do? We created a dictionary. And all the relevant content that we needed, so the interaction ID parameter name, the next best action name, the interaction ID, we store that in that dictionary. And this opened up the possibility to share personalized info with the actual rendering as well. So remember that, I have to go back to a different slide because I forgot to share that with you guys, sorry. Within the next best action, there's some NBA info available as well. License plate, brands, whatsoever. This can be personalized information. And we store that personalized information within that dictionary as well. It's being prefixed by that NBA info tag. Let's move back to the actual content. So that's what happens over here. We transform the dictionary into a query string, and we simply put that query string data into the rule context.reference.settings.parameters. So we're actually using the rendering parameters to pass through the rule context data to the actual rendering. So we inherited it from that customized MVC rendering pipeline, processor, I have to say. We set those dictionary parameters onto the new rendering parameters. That's all that we needed to do. This will make that data, those rendering parameters, with that personalized data available within the rendering. You have an extension method which can create that data personalization attribute within the HTML. And that's how we transferred data from XConnect, from the rule context, in the end, to the relevant rendering to have its own interaction ID per element. So this was just the base setup on how to get data, that next best action from Pega, how to put it into XConnect, how to use it within rendering, We had 4 challenges for it. The identification part, so new contexts are not stored in the XDB, only at the end of a session. We had to do this explicitly. Triggering of a next best action, we are doing that using live goals and live events, the default mechanism of Sitecore. The personalization approach had an issue because Sitecore doesn't retrieve data during the session from XConnect, only at the start of a session, so we had to solve that. And sending of the feedback was actually the hardest. So we had to make use of live events and live goals, and we made use of the rule context dot rendering reference rendering parameters to pass through data from the actual rule context to the actual rendering in the end. That is what we needed from a basic perspective to make it to work for MVC and for JSS. So the cool part is now we have set up that basic personalization approach, which isn't, to be honest, too special. We can work on JSS to get the real-time personalization. So let's take a closer look at what happens on JSS. And remember, we try to stick to the standard as much as possible. I'm going to reset my data. Here, in this case, I'm going to save an empty next best action list. So we'll see the default rendering. I'm moving back to, I'm going to open up developer toolbar to see what happens on the web API requests. And we'll see what happens within the funnel. So this is an embedded MVC, JSS rendering. So this part is JSS and the rest, so the header and footer is MVC. What happens? The funnel connects to the JSS endpoint. And we can see that there's some data available with the placeholders, with the bottom, with the main, with the top, and some components are in this place. This component is called rich text context, it's just a default component. When we update to a new personalized action, let me save it. We do see that there is a new call made to that XConnect endpoint. And it returns multiple components. So we are not updating data, so we're not sending data to the client, we're just sending a trigger to the client, which tells the client, hey, go and request a new visualization of this JSS page to see what happens. And because of the fact that even JSS makes use of the same rendering pipelines and is evaluating the same rules and conditions in the same way, that made sure that everything that I just explained works for JSS as well. So in this case, I received those 2 different components with the personalized content inside it. I think that's radical, but how does this work? And this is too easy to be true, but it's really true. That's the fun fact. It's just a few lines of code. Let's get back to the presentation. You might think that Pega sends a notification to the client, but this is not possible because Pega is in our landscape. It's not allowed to make any connection with untrusted clients. So this is not how it works. So it might look like that the client is continuously requesting Sitecore for a new view. Sitecore is getting the NBAs for XConnect. Pega saves the NBAs, but we don't see any polling going around as well. Just at the moment that we are updating an NBA with that personalized content as well, just at that very moment, a request is being made. So there's no polling involved. How could this possibly work? Well, we're making use of Azure SignalR. It's a real-time web functionality to update connected clients without polling the server, which basically means we can send a message to a client, And that client can evaluate that message and execute any actions. They're and it can send an update to a group of clients. It can send an update to a group of several clients, as I told you before. For example, this happens in chat rooms, but it can send data to an individual. And if I send data to that E01, to that SUGCON Analytics ID cookie, which has been registered, then it can update that very single browser that's connected to SUGCON. That's really cool. Well, there are quite the three variants of Signal R. Normal ASP.NET Signal R, which works with full framework together with SUGCON, that is. We do have ASP.NET Core Signal R and Azure Signal R. ASP.NET Core and Azure Signal R are not backwards compatible with ASP.NET Signal R. So ASP.NET Signal R would not be the preferred choice, although SUGCON forced us to use ASP.NET full framework Signal R because it cannot use ASP.NET Core yet. The fun fact is, if you're sticking to the Azure Signal R, then Azure Signal R has the hub server built in, and you don't need any server implementation anymore. So you can get rid of that ASP.NET Signal R implementation, and you can just solve some communication within the client. So there's no maintenance, there's no scaling issue. All these issues are gone. How does that stuff work? Well, Pega connects to the Azure Signal R. It's an open service which is protected by several keys. You don't want to expose those keys to the public, but as we trust Pega, we could assign a key to Pega, and Pega is able to send a notification for that user. Signal R can recognize, for example, that E01 token, that SUGCON Global Analytics ID, sees whether or not that user was connected, and can push a notification to that user. That client can do a GET request on the JSS endpoint. Everything that I explained in part 1, for example, on how to retrieve those XConnect facets and the context and things like that, that's still working. So it's getting data from XConnect. And at that moment, well, we have a working setup. There's just one thing. How can the client register to Azure Signal R without knowing that key? Well, we put a broker in between. It's called an Azure function. Part of the protocol is that the client, the JavaScript library that I'm talking about, can talk to Azure Signal R with a negotiation function as a standard protocol for Azure Signal R. The Azure function knows about that secret key. It's not exposed to the public, of course, that key. And it makes a call to, well, handle that request that that client makes to subscribe that user to Azure Signal R. Azure Signal R responds, hey, I have an access token for this client, a unique access token, and a URL on which it should connect to. So it's sending back that information to the client, and the client can subscribe to Azure Signal R based on the data. It sounds very complicated, but it is very easy to implement. Let's take a closer look on this communication part. I am going to clear everything and do a reload. So what happens? I load that JSS endpoint just to have an immediate response to the client. And the second thing that happens, and you do see it over here, is a negotiate call to my local host. I have an Azure Functions emulator running on my local machine. That's why it's connected to the local host. But well, you just should run it in Azure, of course. If we take a closer look, then a request will be made to that negotiation function, and we retrieve an access token and a URL. As I just explained, that URL will be used to make a new request to Azure Signal R, and that access token is used for authentication. And this may contain the identity of the current user, the anonymous user, or a logged in user. That's possible as well, of course. So if we are looking at that request which is made to Azure Signal R. We can see it over here. This is the URL that was retrieved from that Azure function. That token will be sent as bearer token authentication as in the authorization header to Signal R as well. And it will respond with a message, hey, I have these types of available transports and this is your connection ID. This is a WebSocket setup. So let's dive into the WebSocket communication. Sorry, dry mouth. This is the connection, the WebSocket connection that has been set up. And we do see a lot of messages going over the line. But there's nothing. It's just a keep alive message to see if the client is still connected. If it's not connected anymore, then that access token gets invalidated and it's not reusable anymore. But what happens when I update that message? So let's send, a new personalization. Let's change the license plate from B to C, and save it. Within that WebSocket connection, we can see that a new message was sent from the server with a message, there is a new personalization available. Just a notification, no content, nothing. And based on this message, that JSS page will be reloaded. What does it mean in terms of code? And you will laugh. I'm an architect, even I could do it. So if I can do it, you can do it. Let me find my presentation deck. This is all the code that's required for the Azure function. So we had to add an endpoint called negotiate. And based on these attributes, this is all the thing that you had to write. This, well, 2 lines of code. This will do the heavy lifting to do the negotiation, get that access token, get that endpoint for the actual Signal R implementation, and return that connection info object back to the client. This is the only thing that you will need within your Azure function to do the negotiation. The thing that sounded very hard is actually very simple to implement. The second part is to alter your JSS code. So I downloaded the NPM package for the Hub Connection Builder, for the Azure Signal R Hub Connection Builder. I configure, and don't look at the crappy code, I got it to work, that's the most important part. I connected to that negotiation function, so to my local Azure function, and I started that Signal R communication. And for every new message, I fire an event. So every new message that's called new message, I fire an event. What happens in that part of the code? I will retrieve the new visualization of that JSS page, which basically executes every rule, every rendering, well, everything that Sidecar should do. And if I retrieve or get some response back, I will rebind it to my JSS app. And that is how that real-time personalization happens. So if you look one more time at that JSS setup, I have negotiation. That was that Azure Signal R function. The Azure function. It makes sure that a request will be made to Azure Signal R based on that authorization header. It will make sure that Azure Signal R connection will be made. And every time that a new personalization takes place, so let's change this one into say it, we'll see that the web socket will receive a new message. That's that event that I was talking about. This will trigger the new request of the JSS funnel. And because of the rebind of JSS, it will serve the new content to the user. And that's basically it. And this is how we implemented real-time personalization within Sidecar and Sidecar JSS. And thank you for listening.
Nice job.
All right, thank you, Bas. That was great.
All right, we have some questions. Bas, you're ready to take some?
Sorry, what did you say?
We have some questions. Are you ready?
Cool. Yeah,
All
I'm
right.
ready.
First one is from Sumit. Can you show the facet that you bring in from Pega?
Can I show the facet I bring in from Pega? Yeah, the definition of the facet within Sidecore. I have to open up my my solution. 1 moment. One moment. It's firing up. Are you interested in the real implementation within Visual Studio, within the C# code? Is that the question?
I think they were just asking to show the facet. So yeah, I'm guessing that they're looking for the C# code.
I hope I can find it. Yeah, it's over here. Oh. It's just a list of next best actions. Well, pretty standard. You can find everything about facets and XConnect facets on the Sidecore documentation site. I would refer to that, but that's basically it.
Great. The next question is, what is your approach to cookie consent? Do you wait for users' consent before dropping a cookie in his browser?
Approach to the cookie and consent. It's too complex to give a good answer on that part right now. Sorry for that, but I cannot answer that question now.
All right. Okay. And did you measure performance impact of the XConnect request to refresh the contact?
Yeah, I told that in the presentation as well. We could ignore that performance overhead. It was not much.
Okay, and I believe the last question we're taking here is, how did you connect Pega to Azure SignalR Hub?
There's several approaches for it. There are several libraries for it. So, for example, there's a C# SDK available, a Java SDK available, and you could write your own implementation. I'm focused on the Microsoft landscape and not on the Pega landscape. So, what approach they used, I really don't know. And if you're having problems on connecting any kind of product to Azure SignalR, you could always put a small web API in between or API management within Azure. So you could define your own protocol to use it as some kind of proxy, which does the heavy lifting. That could be a solution for you as well.
Right. I think that's all the questions we're taking. Jason, is there anything else you'd like to bring up? Yeah.
Well, yeah, thanks for listening.
There's a couple more that have come in.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. I assume that you're using GraphQL. Any requirements or specifications to enable subscriptions?
No, I'm not using GraphQL. Okay. Not that I know of. Not on purpose, it is. No, we're just using JSS. You might be, well, between quotes, fooled by the endpoint that you have seen on my application. But we decided to run JSS on a different endpoint. But that's a long story, which I can't elaborate on that one right now. But okay. It is really in JSS endpoint.
And can we have NBA based on pattern card to which the customer belongs?
Yeah, but I would offload those pattern cards to that external decision engine and not host it within Sidecore. You could use it. You could use pattern cards as input parameters to Pega, to that external decision engine. So yeah, there are various ways which you could implement it, but to give a correct answer on that one, a good answer, sorry, I would have to know more about the use case. But I really can imagine that there are combinations possible, yes.
Okay. Another one's just come in. How have you found using JavaScript rendering in terms of performance? Is it right that it is recommended to have only one JS rendering per page?
We are currently using just one JS rendering per page, but I've not seen any performance issues so far. And we're not rendering those JSS funnels in memory, so they are rendered at the client. So we don't face those issues too much.
Okay. So lots of questions about sharing your presentation. So just, can you share anything about how MBA conversions are measured?
No, sorry, not I don't want, but I just don't know how they are measured. That's something that happens within the Pega system. Our data scientists and other people are looking into that. That's not something that I'm have any knowledge of. We are too large of an organization to know everything about everything.
Yeah, yeah. And Sitecore itself is too large to know everything about everything inside the Sitecore alone, right?
Yeah, yeah, that's right.
Yeah. What is the XConnect tool you are using?
Something that I didn't write, but a colleague of mine. So it's some self-fabricated tool to be able to do some quick XConnect updates.
Is it available on GitHub or something that you could?
No, it's not available, and it's tailored towards this NBA info.
Mm-hmm.
I could discuss with the original author. I hope he is listening, Harold Smit, if he could update it to make it generally available.
Yeah, that would be great. So,
or did he ask the question?
No, it was Greg Kaufman. Is
okay, no, okay.
He's based out of Sitecore, right? So
yeah.
Got a few more minutes. What other channels might be live updated as well based on this behavior? Do you use the same pattern for that?
What kind of channels?
What channels might be live updated as well based on this behavior?
In this case, of course, the web chatbots might be live updated. That's what I come up with. Mobile applications, of course. You could use this pattern, but there are some other patterns that could be used in mobile applications as well. But yeah, these are the use cases.
You do a CRM as well?
Might be, depends on the use cases. It depends. Yeah, that's slide 42, an answer to everything, of course.
Yeah, absolutely right. Do you track impressions of personalized content if users saw, CTAX and did not convert, that kind of thing?
Yeah. So every impression we store that, we send it back to Pega. So we track that. So if they don't convert, we can see that in our reports as well. How it's done, I don't know, but it's done.
Magic.
Yeah, magic.
I think that's all we're getting in at the moment.
Hey, Akshay.
Hey, Bas, how's it going? Yeah, that's the other cameras.
Well, I think that's it. Well, if there are any more questions, well, feel free to reach out to me on Twitter, Stack Exchange, Slack, whatsoever, and I hope I can help you out with your issues.
Awesome. Thanks, Bas.
Thank you for giving me the opportunity to present over here.
Oh, no worries. Have a good rest of your day.
Thank you so
Thank you,
much.
Bas. That was a great session.
Thanks. Are we in private right now?
Nope.
Nope, we can still see you and hear you.
You can give us your bank details if you like.
Put your shirt back on.
And my pants, yeah.
Share my.
Hey, Nick.
Hey, we got Nick here a little early.
He wants to
Guys.
chit chat.
How's it going?
Good.
So we are up to 2,000 euros on the
Yes, sir.
on the donations. Nice job.
We're almost at 360 attendees.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
Everybody's starting to wake up.
North America coming online.
Yeah.
I think Europe has been pretty busy though during this.
It's
during
the
this time.
work day, right? So I think as the work day starts to drop, we might get more people.
What we got?
I just finished processing 7 hours worth of video.
Oh, you processed it already?
Yeah.
Let's have a look at the fundraiser. We got over 2,000 euros. Yep, 2,000 euros, bang on. So, yeah, please donate to the COVID Solidarity Fund. From the WHO. They're doing some amazing work in trying to combat COVID-19 and globally, and especially in those regions that are worse hit and aren't as fortunate as us. Sure, it's a tough time for all of us, especially those who are less well off. I think we're quite fortunate in the IT world that we can work remotely. All we need is an internet connection, and for the most part, a lot of our lives have not been hugely affected.
Yeah. So any little helps. So even a few dollars helps. So don't hold back because you want to donate a few hundred. It doesn't matter. Any little helps.
How you doing, Nick?
I'm good, thank you. It's raining, of course.
It's raining here as well, so feels like a UK day for me here.
Yeah, that's why it's a little bit dark in here because of that. But never mind.
Well, it's spring, summertime there. It used to be nice and sunny.
Yeah, we had like a week of good stuff and then gone back to business as usual.
You're gonna talk about how to copy and paste Habitat? Is that what we're doing?
Yeah. It was hard work stretching that out to 45 minutes. But
yeah. Git clone Habitat, all right? I'm sure Nick will appreciate the using a Habitat as a starter kit, right?
Yeah, I have his sticker on the back of my laptop. Friends use Habitat as a starter kit.
Just to let everybody know, there is a Chillout Lounge. It's a Zoom channel. You can jump on this URL and use this password to log in. Please don't share this on social media, just to avoid trolling and Zoom bombing. But there's a Been a number of people. I think people probably start to join again now that say everyone's starting to wake up and the day's becoming a bit more free.
If it's quiet, shouldn't hold you back from
Exactly. Just jump on and
speaking.
make the party happen, right?
That's right.